It was just another quiet evening in Rainrock, Oregon, the kind of town where the trees seem older than the buildings and everyone knows everyone by name. Nestled deep in the foothills of the Cascades, Rainrock had always moved at a slower pace, like the heavy mist that hung low over the streets for most of the year. The kind of place where secrets settle like pine needles, quiet and forgotten until someone kicks them up again. It was October 3rd, 1988, a Monday, and by all accounts, 7-year-old Callie Jensen was just trying to get home before curfew. She'd picked up a double shift at the Rainrock diner after school, bussing tables for the dinner rush. It wasn't glamorous, but she didn't complain. Callie was the kind of girl who just showed up, quiet, polite, soft-spoken, with that half-smile you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. She had dreams of studying animal science in Eugene, maybe getting out of Rainrock one day. But for now, she was here, folding napkins and pouring coffee for truckers and loggers, trying to save what she could. She clocked out at 9:04 p.m. 2 waitresses saw her leave through the side door, the one facing the gravel lot. She waved goodbye, slung her backpack over her shoulder, and walked toward Mill Road, the shortcut that ran along Mackenzie Creek, back toward her family's house on the north end of town. It was maybe a 20-minute walk. She'd done it dozens of times. A flashlight in her bag, a windbreaker zipped to the neck, and boots made for wet terrain. But that night, Callie never made it home. Her mother, Denise Jensen, waited up until nearly midnight, assuming maybe Callie had stopped at a friend's or stayed to help close up. But when she called the diner and the manager said Callie had left hours ago, that quiet unease in Denise's chest turned to something sharp. She drove the route herself in her old Ford Tempo, headlights sweeping over empty shoulder and fog-soaked trees, slowing near the trailhead by the old mill gate where Mill Road veers into forest. But there was nothing, just damp gravel and dark woods. She called the Rainrock Police Department at 12:37 a.m. At first, they treated it like a runaway. Small town, teenage girl. Maybe she had a fight with a boyfriend or needed to blow off steam. But Denise insisted. Callie wasn't like that. She had no boyfriend, no drama. She'd even packed lunch for the next day. By sunrise, officers were canvassing the area with flashlights, checking the banks along Mackenzie Creek and questioning employees at the diner. Nothing. Not a footprint. Not a broken branch. Nothing. Until around 7:20 a.m., when a local fisherman named Joe McClary spotted something snagged in the underbrush about a quarter-mile downstream from the trailhead. It was Callie's backpack, wedged between 2 rocks, half submerged in the current, her wallet still inside, student ID, a folded sketchbook, her spiral math notebook soaked but legible. There were no tears, no signs of a struggle, just her belongings, eerily untouched, and that's when Rainrock began to panic. Search dogs were brought in, volunteers fanned out for miles. Helicopters buzzed overhead for 3 straight days, scanning the hillsides and riverbanks. Local radio stations ran constant alerts. Teenagers were escorted in pairs. Schools held assemblies. And the sheriff at the time, Harold Becker, held a press conference saying, "We believe foul play is involved." The only real lead came on the 4th day, an anonymous tip. Someone had seen a blue pickup truck idling near the entrance to Mill Road around 9:10 p.m. The caller refused to give a name, just said the truck had its lights off, engine running, and sat there for nearly 5 minutes before pulling away fast. Make and model? Unknown. License plate? Not visible. No confirmation if Callie ever got into the truck. No follow-up tip. It led nowhere. The police followed every angle they could. Truckers, parolees, transients. They interviewed every known sex offender within a 100-mile radius. Every ex-employee of the mill. Every ex-boyfriend of her older sister. There was talk of a drifter seen at the diner 2 nights earlier, of a stranger asking about directions near the trail, of a local logger who used to make crude remarks. But every suspect had an alibi. Every story had a dead end. By Thanksgiving, the search had slowed. By Christmas, it had stopped. And just like that, Callie Jensen, a girl with plans and sketches and a favorite spot along the creek, became a name on a missing poster, a whisper in a foggy town. Her photo taped to the bulletin board inside the diner, fading with each season. Her parents moved to Bend 2 years later. The trail grew cold. Rainrock moved on, but her mother never did. Denise Jensen kept every clipping, every flyer, every interview transcript in a brown filing box marked Callie. She kept a candle in the window for 18 years. Every birthday, she mailed a card to their old address with her daughter's name on the envelope just in case. "I wanted her to know we never stopped looking," she once told a reporter. But time has a way of erasing footprints, even the ones left in grief, until the summer of 2021. That year, a wildfire scorched nearly 13,000 acres of forest along the West Ridge outside Rainrock. Entire slopes were reduced to blackened earth. The air was thick with smoke. Ash rained down for days. And in late August, after a dozer crew cut a line through an abandoned property north of the old mill, something unexpected surfaced beneath the roots of a collapsed root cellar. A rusted metal drum, sealed tight, buried at an angle, about 3 feet down. Fire crews assumed it was trash, maybe old fuel. They flagged it for hazmat inspection. But when it was opened by investigators 2 days later, what they found sent a shock through the entire county. Inside was a piece of torn denim later confirmed to be part of a faded Levi's jacket. Folded inside it was a cracked zipper pull. It still had blood traces on the fabric, degraded, but testable. And beneath that, wedged in the bottom of the drum, was a fragment of plastic keychain, bright red, with the Rainrock Diner logo. It was Callie's. And for the first time in over 3 decades, Rainrock had something it hadn't had since 1988. Evidence. Real, physical, testable evidence. DNA pulled from the zipper came back with a partial profile, and when entered into the CODIS system, it matched someone unexpected, not a drifter, not a stranger, but a former local, someone who had worked at the old mill, lived just 2 miles from the creek, and abruptly left town just weeks after Callie disappeared. A man no one had talked to in years. His name was Warren Lee Beckett. To most people in Rainrock back in the 82nds, he was just Warren from the mill. Quiet. A bit of a loner. He worked the night shift on the green chain line, stacking lumber fresh off the saw. Lived alone in a trailer on Pine Hollow Road, just a few miles from the trail where Callie disappeared. Drove an old blue Ford pickup, often parked near the woods when he wasn't working. But in November 1988, just 6 weeks after Callie vanished, Warren Beckett left town without warning. He told his supervisor he was headed to Idaho for work, never said goodbye, didn't pick up his last paycheck, no forwarding address, just vanished, like he'd never been there. At the time, nobody thought much of it. The mill had been laying people off, and Warren didn't have family in town. No one filed a missing person report. No one searched his trailer. So when the DNA on Callie's zipper came back as a familial match to Warren Beckett's nephew in 2021, the Oregon State Police reopened the case immediately. A deeper background check revealed something investigators hadn't caught in the original 1988 investigation. Warren had been convicted of crimes, misdemeanor assault on a teenage girl in Yakima, Washington, back in 1976. Served 6 months. After his release, he bounced around jobs in logging towns across the Pacific Northwest, never staying in one place more than a year or two, always keeping low, always staying quiet. And in 1988, he had landed in Rainrock. Detectives now had a suspect, a real one. But the problem? They had no idea where Warren Beckett was. He hadn't been seen in Oregon since the week Callie vanished. No digital trail, no credit history, nothing in DMV records. The man had disappeared before the internet had even become a thing. But technology had caught up. Using a genealogical triangulation from the DNA sample and assistance from a private ancestry database, investigators located Warren Beckett's half-brother in Libby, Montana. The man hadn't spoken to Warren in decades but mentioned that Warren had been off the grid somewhere in northern Idaho, possibly near Bonner's Ferry. "He's not the kind to call on birthdays," he told them. "But I remember he bought some land out there." Said he didn't trust people anymore. After nearly 4 months of surveillance and satellite scanning, state police finally located a cabin registered under a shell company tied to Warren's old Social Security number. Deep in the woods, no phone line, no utilities, just a solar rig, a well, and a battered blue truck hidden under a tarp. On February 19, 2022, a tactical team quietly approached the cabin. Inside, They found a gaunt, gray-haired man sitting by a wood stove, sipping black coffee. He didn't run, didn't protest, just stared through the officers like they weren't real. When asked if he was Warren Beckett, he nodded once. When asked if he knew Callie Jensen, his eyes flickered, but he said nothing. Back in Rainrock, the news broke like a dam. After 33 years of silence, it finally felt like Callie's name was being spoken again on purpose. Local radio stations ran special broadcasts. Former classmates wrote long, emotional posts on Facebook. And Denise Jensen, now 66 years old and living alone in Bend, got a knock on her door from 2 detectives who had driven 5 hours just to tell her in person. We believe we have the man responsible for Callie's disappearance. In the interrogation room, Warren stayed mostly silent. For 6 straight hours, he didn't deny anything, didn't offer a story, just stared at the table, lips pressed shut. He asked for no lawyer, he asked for no water, just sat there expressionless. But investigators had what they needed: the DNA evidence, the location of the jacket, the matching truck seen idling at the trail, a prior assault conviction. And then the final piece. Inside Warren's cabin, in a rusted lockbox beneath the floorboards, they found a small pile of keepsakes. Among them, a cracked sketchbook filled with faded pencil drawings. One of them matched a page torn from Callie's notebook found in her backpack in 1988. Another showed a rough sketch of Mackenzie Creek, the old mill trail, a bend in the road where the underbrush thickens marked with a tiny red X. It was where the jacket had been buried. Still, despite everything, Warren refused to confess. He never spoke another word. But the evidence was enough. He was indicted on charges of aggravated kidnapping, murder, and unlawful disposal of human remains, even though Callie's body had never been found. Oregon allows for prosecution without a body under certain circumstantial thresholds, and this case, after 33 years, had finally met that burden. During the pre-trial hearing, the prosecution laid out the theory that Warren Beckett had likely stalked Callie's walking routine from the diner, that he parked his truck near the old mill trail, waited for her to pass, and either forced or lured her into the woods, that she was killed most likely from blunt force trauma and her belongings stayed to look like a disappearance, and that her jacket, the one she always wore on cold nights, was kept, not out of panic, but out of compulsion. As for motive, that's where the mystery deepened, because the state couldn't find a single recorded interaction between Warren and Callie. No overlapping workplaces, no family connections, not even a receipt or witness citing that placed them in the same room. Which raised a terrifying question. Had she simply been chosen, at random? Or was there something else, something even deeper about the mind of Warren Beckett that no one would ever truly understand? During opening arguments, the prosecution made a quiet, chilling statement to the jury. Sometimes monsters don't howl. Sometimes they work night shifts, buy groceries, and live in quiet towns. And sometimes, they know exactly where to hide. The defense, surprisingly, offered no alternate theory. Just silence. No witness list. No cross-examination. Just a claim that the evidence was circumstantial and incomplete. But the jury didn't buy it. After 4 days of testimony and 6 hours of deliberation, they returned with a guilty verdict on all charges. Warren Beckett was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't blink. As the verdict was read, Denise Jensen sat in the front row, clutching a locket with her daughter's photo inside. She later told reporters, "I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to know. I wanted it to stop hurting every time I heard the wind outside my window and thought maybe it was her coming home." But for all the answers the case had given, one still remained. Because despite exhaustive efforts, cadaver dogs, LiDAR scans, soil excavation along the creek, Callie's body was never found. In the months after Warren Beckett's conviction, Rainrock changed. Subtly, but unmistakably, locals began driving that stretch of Mill Road again, the one that had felt cursed for decades. The trailhead where Callie was last seen was cleaned up by volunteers, brush cleared, signage restored. Someone no one ever claimed credit placed a simple wooden bench overlooking the bend in the creek. A plaque beneath it read, "In memory of Callie Jensen, still walking with us." For Denise Jensen, The guilty verdict brought something close to peace but not closure. "It's like finding the book," she told a reporter, "but the last page is torn out. What happened to her daughter's body? Where did Warren put her? Why did he keep the jacket?" Questions that gnawed at her every night, even as the world around her moved on. And then, in late 2023, a retired U.S. Forest Service ranger named Eli Trenton came forward with a memory. He'd heard about the conviction in a newspaper clipping, just a passing headline stapled to a bulletin board in a service station outside of Klamath Falls. But the name, Warren Beckett, pulled something out of his brain. A name he hadn't heard in over 30 years. He called the Oregon State Police and asked to speak to someone about the Rainrock case. His story, at first, sounded disconnected. But then it took a turn. Back in the summer of 1989, almost a year after Callie disappeared, Eli had been stationed near the Willamette National Forest, doing seasonal work checking fire lines and illegal dump sites. One evening in July, he'd received a tip about smoke coming from an abandoned property about 15 miles south of Rainrock. When he arrived, the smoke had stopped, but he noticed something strange. A series of burned patches, like someone had set small fires just beneath the soil. No clear purpose. Not campfires. Not trash fires. More like attempts to destroy something buried. Near one of the burns, he'd found charred scraps of fabric, partially melted plastic, and what looked like bone fragments, but they were too small to confirm. He filed a brief report and sent a sample to the regional lab. But after months of no follow-up, and with budget cuts looming, the case was closed. No one ever came to investigate, and he moved on. He still remembered the location, though a narrow offshoot off Jasper Ridge Road, near an old hunting shack once owned by a logging outfit. When investigators returned to that site in January 2024 with ground-penetrating radar, they found what the ranger couldn't: a shallow burn pit, lined with rocks, about 4 feet wide and 3 feet deep. Within it they uncovered 17 bone fragments, all heavily degraded by heat and age. But 2 of them, one from a femur, one a molar, were viable enough for DNA comparison. The results came back in March, a 99.92% match to Callie Jensen. After 36 years, her remains had been found. The news broke quietly, no press conference, no cameras. Just a handwritten letter sent to Denise from the state medical examiner's office, and a call from the lead detective. "We found her." Denise drove alone to Rainrock the next day. She stood by the creek where the backpack was found, sat on the bench by the trailhead, and then asked to be taken to the burn site. When she arrived, she just stood there, hands in her coat pockets, breath fogging in the air. After a while she said, "This isn't where she's buried. This is just where her pain stopped." The town of Rainrock held a vigil that week. Hundreds showed up. Some brought candles. Others brought photos. A few former classmates shared poems Callie had written in high school, ones she never got to finish. And when the night ended, Denise stepped up to the microphone for the first time in public. She said, "I used to pray for answers, but what I learned is that answers aren't the same as healing. You can know everything and still feel broken. But at least now, I can say goodnight to her, instead of just goodbye." A memorial service was held the following Sunday at the Rainrock Community Center. Her ashes were scattered into Mackenzie Creek, the same place her backpack was found all those years ago. But even as the case seemed fully closed, one final, haunting detail remained. In April 2024, a forensic archivist reviewing the box of evidence from Warren's cabin made an unexpected discovery. Tucked between loose papers and receipts was a folded piece of graph paper, yellowed, water-stained, nearly torn through the center. On it was a crude calendar. October. One date circled in red. October 3rd, the day Callie disappeared. But beneath that, 3 more dates. October 5th, October 8th, October 11th, all marked with an X. And below the last one, a single word, written in shaky cursive. Next. The archivist flagged the note immediately. Police searched for missing persons reports tied to those dates in surrounding counties. There were none. No girls missing. No known abductions. Nothing to match. But when detectives went back further, digging into reports from the towns Warren lived in before Rainrock, a troubling pattern emerged. In Coos Bay, Oregon, a girl named Leila Mendez, 16, vanished in 1986. walking home from her after-school job. Her backpack was found in a drainage ditch. No body, no suspect. In Aberdeen, Washington, in 1983, a 15-year-old named Tanya Blake disappeared from a laundromat after leaving a note saying she'd be home by dark. Her jacket was found in a dumpster behind a mill. Again, no suspect. And in Yakima, in 1976, the town where Warren was convicted for misdemeanor assault, there was a missing persons report that had been closed as a runaway. A girl named Bethany Carr, age 14. No body ever found. Investigators now believe Warren Beckett may have been a serial predator moving from town to town across the Pacific Northwest, targeting isolated teens, always just under the radar. Always leaving just enough behind to be missed but not enough to be found. With no living family to press charges and no bodies recovered, those cases remain officially unresolved. But to the families still waiting, Rainrock became more than just a place where justice happened. It became a reminder that even in forgotten places, truth has a way of coming back up through the dirt, and sometimes the forest remembers what we try to bury. Warren Beckett never confessed, not to Callie's murder, not to any of the others. Even after his conviction, after the remains were found, after the calendar with the word "next" was entered into evidence, he refused to speak. He declined interviews, ignored questions from law enforcement, denied every opportunity to tell his side of the story. His court-appointed attorney once said, "He just won't engage. It's like whatever happened in him, it stopped needing words years ago." But silence has its own kind of noise. And in the small logging towns that dotted the Pacific Northwest, Warren Beckett's name became the whisper parents used to keep kids from walking alone. By the summer of 2024, investigators from 3 states were working together to re-examine missing persons cases between 1,975 and 1,990 that had once been dismissed, misclassified, or simply lost in the shuffle. They created what they called the Beckett File, a shared digital repository of open cases with similar patterns. Teenage girls, ages 14-18, last seen walking alone, are often from work, belongings recovered days later, with little to no physical evidence, proximity to sawmills, paper plants, or logging camps, disappearances between June and October. By October, the Beckett File had 14 cases flagged for potential connection, 4 in Washington, 5 in Oregon, 3 in Idaho, and 2 in California and Nevada that were borderline but eerily familiar. The FBI officially opened a multi-jurisdictional task force, but the road to confirmation was slow. Too much time had passed. Too much had been lost to poor record-keeping, old filing systems, and literal decay. Many of the original reports had been written on typewriters, evidence stored in damp boxes. Witnesses had died, moved away, or forgotten the details. Still, small breakthroughs trickled in. In Coos Bay, a lab retested the zipper from Lila Mendez's recovered backpack, using modern mitochondrial sequencing. A partial male profile was found, not conclusive, but consistent with Warren's. In Aberdeen, a retired janitor came forward saying he remembered a strange man loitering behind the laundromat weeks before Tanya Blake vanished. When shown a photo of Beckett, his hand shook. "That's him," he whispered. None of it amounted to formal charges, but it painted a chilling picture. Warren Beckett hadn't just taken Callie. He may have been hunting for years. And what made him so dangerous wasn't rage. It was patience. He didn't act out of impulse. He planned. He watched. He waited for routines. He never rushed. He chose girls whose lives were quiet, who wouldn't be missed right away, who walked alone not because they were reckless, but because they were responsible. And when the moment came, he struck with just enough force to silence, but not enough to leave a mess. There were no bloody scenes, no dragged bodies, no screams heard in the woods, only gaps, pauses in someone's life that never resumed. And for decades, Warren walked through the world unbothered, stacking lumber, drinking coffee, drawing maps no one would see until the fire came, until the earth gave up what he buried. By the end of 2024, law enforcement quietly acknowledged what many already feared. Warren Beckett may have been one of the most prolific unknown predators in Pacific Northwest history, but he'll never be tried for those other cases. Because on the night of the 12th of December 2024, Warren Beckett was found dead in his prison cell at the Snake River Correctional Institution. No sign of foul play, no suicide note, just an unresponsive body slumped in his bunk, a small stack of paper beside him. The prison warden later confirmed the papers were maps, drawings of forested trails, river bends, creek beds. Some were labeled, some weren't. One showed the area around Mackenzie Creek, the place Callie disappeared. Another bore the initials B, C, Bethany Carr. Another, Tanya, 8th and Ash. And one was a blank grid with 7 X's drawn in a spiral pattern, numbered 1 through 7. 7 locations, but no names. To this day, the Oregon State Police haven't publicly released the exact coordinates. They're still searching. And in those towns, Rainrock, Coos Bay, Aberdeen, Yakima, people still wonder, is there someone out there still waiting for news? A family that never connected their daughter's fate to a name they'd never heard? That's why this story matters. Because for every cold case that ends, 10 more go quiet. And the people left behind? They don't get a clean ending. They get decades of what-ifs, birthdays that never arrive, empty chairs at Thanksgiving. And the worst part? Sometimes, the killer dies before the truth is ever fully known. In April 2025, the Rainrock City Council voted to name the restored trail system near Mackenzie Creek as Callie's Path. At the dedication ceremony, Denise Jensen spoke one final time. She stood beside a wooden trail sign, worn but new, carved with her daughter's name. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She said, "I used to think the worst part was not knowing. But now I think the worst part is knowing how many others there might be. I hope this path helps people remember, not just Callie, but the girls who didn't get their names back." She paused, then added, "And maybe it reminds the next girl walking home to never believe no one's watching, because someone always is. Sometimes it's a mother waiting at the window. Sometimes it's a stranger in the woods. And sometimes, the scariest thing of all, is that they can be the same person." If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us reach more people who care about these stories. Comment your thoughts or theories below. We read every one. Subscribe for more in-depth cold case documentaries and true crime breakdowns. And remember, this case is based on authentic investigative procedures and real-world case patterns. All names and events in this story are fictional, but crafted to reflect the emotional reality of unresolved crimes.